Hey guys, so we're moving on to the next set of notes in Unit 6, and that's the 6.2 notes, and these are operations with polynomials. Okay, so this is where we're going to do some multiplying. We did some adding and subtracting with the polynomials, and now we're going to do some multiplying, okay? So remember, when we are multiplying, we have to apply the product rule, which says that if they have the same variable, raised to the same, raised to a different power, but as long as it's the same variable, then you in fact add those numbers, okay? You add those exponents, okay? So that's just something to recall when you're doing this. So in this one, it wants us to use the distributive property to remove the parentheses. So remember, distributive says I'm going to take this outside number and letter, and I'm going to multiply it into both pieces, okay? So if I do that in the first piece, and if I zoom in a little bit here, if I do that in the first term, I've got 10, and if I write this out, I'm going to write this out for you for the first one. I've got 10c to the fourth times 6c to the third, and then I have a minus 10c to the fourth, again, times 7, okay? So I was just going to write that piece out, knowing that I have to solve each of these before I set up my final answer. So if I solve this one, this first one, I have 10, remember you always solve or multiply the coefficients first. So I have 10 times 6 is 60. And then I have c to the fourth and c to the third becomes c to the add the powers 7th power. Okay, there's my first term. Still have a minus. And then if I multiply the next ones, remember coefficients come first. We have 10 times 7 is 70, and then there is no other c, so we just leave it as c to the fourth power. So our final answer is 60c to the 7th power minus 70c to the fourth power. And that's how you use the distributive property. Okay, I'm just going to write this one out again so that it looks familiar to you guys, and you guys can choose whether you want to do that in your head or if you want to write it down. So in the first one, again, we're taking 5 times b to the 7th and multiplying it into both pieces. So the first part, I have 5b to the 7th times 4b. There's my first term. Plus, my second terms are 5b to the 7th times 3b to the 2nd. And now I'm going to combine each. So multiply the coefficients first. 5 times 4 is 20. And then b to the 7th and b to the first power, because if there is no power, it is the power of 1, becomes b to the 8th power. Plus, now let's do the second part. Again, multiply the coefficients first. 5 times 3 is 15. And then b to the 7th and b to the 2nd, if I add those powers, becomes b to the 9th power. So our final answer here is 20b to the 8th plus 15b to the 9th. All right, now we're going to multiply into 3 separate terms. So make sure that you kind of pay attention to the signs of everything and what you are doing, and you might want to write each of the pieces down. So I'm taking this outside number and I'm multiplying it into 3 terms. Okay, so when I do that, I have negative 8v to the 5th times 2v to the 3rd. There's my first term. Okay, minus, I'm going to put a minus sign in between, negative 8v to the 5th times 7v to the 2nd. I already put the minus sign in between, so I do not need to tag it along with the 7. Okay, plus, again, third one, negative 8v to the 5th times 9v. Okay, now let's take them one piece at a time. Okay, so in the first one, I'm going to multiply the coefficients first. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. And then I'm going to add the exponents of my variables. So v to the 5th and v to the 3rd becomes v to the 8th. 5 plus 3 is 8. Still have a minus symbol in there. And then I'm going to do my second set. So again, multiply the coefficients first. Negative 8 times times positive 7 is negative 56. And then I'm going to add my exponents. So v to the second times v to the fifth becomes v to the seventh power. And then my last, so I put a plus in between. And my last terms, again, I'm going to multiply the coefficients first. So negative 8 times 9 is negative 72. And then v to the fifth and v to the first power becomes v to the sixth power. Now I'm almost done. I'm just going to combine what it is that I can for signs. So remember, the double negative here becomes positive, and you can't do plus a negative, so that's just going to be a minus. So my final answer is going to be negative 16 v to the eighth plus 56 v to the seventh minus 72 v to the sixth. You really have to pay attention to your numbers here, because the simplest mistake with your numbers or your signs could make the whole thing wrong, okay? So pay attention to your scratch work here and make sure you separate it out one by one. So let's try another one. And this one, just the only difference between this one and the last one is that they added another variable in. So we really have to take our time with this and write everything out as we see it, okay? So this negative 7x to the fourth and y needs to get multiplied into all three pieces. So when I do that, I have negative 7x to the fourth and y times 3x to the third. There's our first one. I'm going to put a minus sign in between because that is what is in between the two. And then I have negative 7x to the fourth y times 6x to the sixth y to the fifth. Close the parentheses. And then I'm going to put a plus in between because that's what's given. And if I move my screen along here, I have negative 7x to the fourth y times the last term, which is 4y to the fifth. Okay, so now that I have that all written out, I'm going to solve one piece at a time, okay? There are three separate pieces to solve. So the first one, I have coefficients first. Negative 7 times 3 is negative 21. And then I have my x's are next. So I have x to the fourth and x to the third. That becomes x to the seventh power. Add them. And then my last one, I have just a y that's by itself. So I still have to tag it on and it stays there. Now let's look at our next set. In our next set, if we multiply coefficients first, we've got negative 7 times 6. Negative 7, oh, we need a minus sign in between there. So negative 7 times 6 is negative 42. And then we're going to do our x's. So we have x to the fourth and x to the sixth. Well, 6 plus 4 is 10, so it becomes x to the 10th power. And then we also have y's in there. So we have y to the first power and y to the fifth power. And 1 plus 5 is 6, so it becomes y to the sixth power. Put a plus in between, and then solve the last one. So in the last one, if I do coefficients first, I have negative 7 times 4 is negative 28. And then if I do my x's, I've got x to the fourth, and that's it. So I'm just going to write that in as x to the fourth. And then lastly, when I do my y's, I've got y to the first and y to the fifth, which becomes y to the 1 plus 5, which is 6 power. Then what I want to do is I want to just check and verify that I have all the signs correct. So notice that the double negatives here become positive, and then plus and minus just becomes minus. So my final answer here would be negative 21, x to the seventh y, plus 42, x to the 10th y to the sixth, minus 28, x to the fourth y to the sixth. Lots of numbers, lots of variables. Make sure you take your time with this, okay? And then in the last part, we learn about the FOIL method. And these are the last parts of the 6.2 practice. So the FOIL method says that when you're multiplying two different expressions or sets, also known as binomials, okay, that you first do, FOIL method stands for first, outer, inner, last. So we're going to multiply the first terms, which you'll notice in this picture are the first terms in both of these binomials. and then you're going to multiply those first. And then the O stands for then you have the O in FOIL, which stands for the outers. So the outers here are going to be the outside numbers in our binomials. Okay, so they're the outside numbers. All right, and then the next one in the FOIL method, or the next letter in the FOIL method, is I, and I stands for the inners. So the inners are what's pointing to here are these two inner variables. So B and C here. And then the L in FOIL stands for last. And the last in our binomials are these two last letters that show up in our binomials. Okay? Yes, it looks really confusing, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So let's try it out. So what I usually have people do is I have them lay it out by step. So we have FOIL is what I write in the corner, and then I'm going to solve each of those separately, and then we'll put it all together in the end. So if I solve these separately, F stands for first. So the first terms, F stands for first. So the first terms are C times C. Those are the two first terms in here. So we have C times C, which becomes C squared. Add the two exponents. Then we've got the outers. So the outers in this one are the outside variable. Outside variables are numbers, so the outside terms. So we've got this outside C, and we've got this outside 2. So we've got C times 2, which can just be written as 2C. Okay? And then the next one, we've got the inners. So the inners here are the inside terms. So we've got a 3 and a C here, and we're going to multiply those. So 3 times C is 3C. We rewrite that one as 3C. And then lastly, we have the last terms in our binomials, and that happens to be a 3 in ours and a 2 in the second one. So we have 3 times 2, which is 6. We're not quite done yet because whenever you FOIL, you always have the inner pieces, the outer and the inner, to combine. So when we combine these, we know that together 2C plus 3C is 5C. So when we go to write our final answer, we're just going to string everything together with adding, okay? So our final answer here is going to be C squared plus 5C plus 6. There's our final answer, okay? So again, it takes practice, so the more practice we do, the better we'll get at it. So let's try the next one. So if I write the word FOIL here, and then we solve each of the pieces. So let's start with the first. The first terms in these are U times U, which is U squared, okay? Then let's go to the outers. The outer terms here are the U and the 6. So we've got U times 6, which is just 6U. And then we do the inners. The inners here are -4, count that as a -4, and a positive U. So we've got -4 times U, which is -4U, okay? And then we've got the last, which are -4 and 6. So we do -4 times 6, positive 6 is -24. Then don't forget to combine the insides. 6U minus 4U is 2U. And then write our final answer. So we've got U squared. It's a positive 2U, so we write plus 2U. And then it's a -24, so we write minus 24. And there's our final answer for that one. Okay? So same thing with these multiplying binomials with leading coefficients greater than 1. Same exact thing, we're following the FOIL method, but we just got to be careful that we also multiply the leading coefficients, or the numbers out front of the variables. So in the first one, our first terms are y and 7y. So we've got y times 7y is simply 7y squared, okay? In the next one, we have our outer terms. which are y and -1. Call that a -1. So we say y times -1 is -1y, okay? Then we've got our inner terms. So our inner terms here are 4 and 7y. So we're going to multiply 4 times 7y, which 4 times 7 is 28, and then we tag the y along with it to solve our inners. And then our lasts are 4, the last terms in both of these, and -1. And 4 times -1 is -4. Don't forget to combine the inside. So we have -1y plus 28, which becomes 27y. And then just string our answer together. So our final answer here would be 7y squared as our first term, plus 27y because it's positive, minus 4 because that last one was negative. And there's our final answer there. Okay, so first, outer, inner, last. Let's try the last one here. So the first terms in this one are 5a and a. So 5a times a is 5a squared. Then our outer terms here are 5a and -6. So we've got 5a times -6, which 5 times -6 is -30. Tag along the a. Then we've got our inners. Our inners are -1 and a. So -1 times a is just -a. That's what we would call that. And then we've got our last terms, which are -1 and -6. So you've got -1 times -6 is a positive 6. Combine the inside terms. So -30a minus a is -31a. And then put our entire thing together. So our final answer here would be 5a squared minus 31a plus 6. So that is how we do the FOIL method. So take your time with this. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.